All right. So, about a month ago, I released a video highlighting one obscure cryptid from every US state. And I had such a good time making that video that I think I'm gonna make ultra obscure cryptid hunting into a regular fixture on my channel. I put together a map of all the cryptids that I covered in that first video, and every once in a while I'm gonna pop in with a new video and add a few more entries. Like today, for example, I have 12 new obscure cryptids to share with you. So let's kick things off with
Pennsylvania, the Upland Man-bear.
All right, here's a fun one to start off with. Back in December of 1906, a few newspapers around the country ran an article about a horrible beast stalking the streets of Upland, Pennsylvania. According to witnesses, the monster resembled a polar bear with a human head, or sometimes a sheep with a human head. The beast also had eyes that glittered like hot coals, and it ran as fast as the wind, and its voice rapidly oscillated between a gloomy growl and a thunderous roar. Many people in Upland reported encounters with this monster. Like one guy said that it jumped out in front of him while he was walking home, and another guy said that the man-bear chased him down the street, and one man actually claimed that the monster struck him in the neck, and apparently the blow felt like 1,000 tiny needles. Over time, the people of Upland grew very sick of this creature though. So much so that they actually put together a search party to sniff it out. Armed with guns and clubs and lanterns, the local high school football team set out to capture the elusive man-bear. Reportedly, the football players were sick and tired of the monster chasing after their sisters and sweethearts. So what they did was spread out in a circle around a patch of woods that the man-bear was said to inhabit, and then slowly they walked inwards towards the center of the forest, hoping to trap and capture the beast. The group closed all the way in to the heart of the woods, where eventually they found a small bonfire and the remains of a meal, but no signs of the creature. And that's pretty much the whole man-bear story. As far as I can tell, this article is the one and only time that the monster was ever mentioned in the press. So, seems like the story just dried up as soon as it got started.
New Hampshire, the Monadnock eggs.
Okay, this one is really crazy. I found this story while I was looking through some old issues of the Center for UFO Studies newsletter from the mid-1980s, and in particular, the April/May 1985 edition printed a very interesting letter that the center received concerning a strange incident from back in October of 1955. Here's the story. While attending a boarding school near Mount Monadnock in southern New Hampshire, the letter's author was walking across campus one evening when he happened upon 4 glowing bluish-white ovals in a nearby field. One very large oval was laying on the ground, while 3 smaller ones were hovering around it. Of course, the author was awestruck. He froze and he stared at the ovals for a moment before taking off and running down to a nearby classroom so he could tell his schoolmates what he had seen. He burst into the room and shouted, "Come quick, flying saucers!" And he got a whole crowd of kids all excited, and they ran out of the building ready to run all the way back up to the field. But instead, as soon as they stepped out of the door of the building, right in front of them were the ovals, now hovering above the schoolhouse smack dab in the middle of campus. By that time, everyone was screaming. The school's priest came out and just stood staring at the ovals with his jaw on the floor. And then, slowly, the ovals began to move. One by one, they floated over the campus and passed into a nearby forest. And all the while, the schoolboys just followed underneath, because the ovals were moving super slow and didn't seem all that concerned about the witnesses that were everywhere, so the boys just stood right below the strange objects and walked along with them. Apparently, that really big oval in particular moved extra slowly and cast down a bluish light as bright as day. And then, all of a sudden, the ovals just zipped away. At rapid speed, they disappeared into the trees, and the school kids tried to follow them, but the ovals were just gone. And if you think that's a crazy story, then just listen to this. The author of the letter actually included an addenda to his story, an extra detail that he strangely only remembered long after the original event was over, almost as if his mind was trying to block it out. The author cannot swear that this next part is true, but apparently when he first saw the ovals in the field, the large one on the ground was actually surrounded by 4 individuals in silhouette. And the author doesn't know why, but to this day, he still has the feeling that the figures were extremely agitated about something. The author stood and watched the strange beings for a moment before they seemed to notice him, and that is when he ran down to the school. Spooky.
Alabama, the Choco-Loco Monster.
In May of 1969, Mrs. Margaret Teague was driving down the road in Choco-Loco, Alabama, when she noticed a very strange beast sitting on a hill by the side of the road. The animal was about the size of a cow, and it had a hump like a camel, and a large head filled with large teeth, and it was covered in stringy black and white hair that hung down and obscured most of its body. Because of that hair, Mrs. Teague couldn't tell whether the monster had paws or hoofs, but she could see its head, and oh lordy lordy, what a head. The creature startled Mrs. Teague so much that she accidentally drove into a ditch while she was trying to get a better look at it, and after that, I guess the monster just disappeared. Until a week later, when Mrs. Teague's son also encountered the monster. Johnny Ray Teague and 3 of his friends were driving down that same road at night when all of a sudden, his car broke down. And as the 4 boys tried to get the car going again, one of them switched on the headlights, and there, sitting in the middle of the road, was the Choco-Loco monster. The boys were so scared, they jumped in the car and locked the doors and rolled up all the windows and watched as the monster circled the car a few times and then sauntered off into the woods. And from there, the monster story was off to the races. The local newspapers printed drawings of what the creature was supposed to look like, and word spread real quick, and before long, literally thousands of cars were driving up and down that stretch of road where the boys broke down. Monster hunters from out of town had descended onto Choco-Loco. Over the next few weeks, at least 6 other people claimed to see the monster, and hunters began to walk around at night shooting at anything that moved. And the residents, after a couple of weeks of this, began to say that they would actually rather deal with the monster than all these strangers running around town with hunting rifles. Eventually, though, the excitement around the monster began to calm down, and the sightings dwindled away, and before long, the Choco-Loco monster became a footnote in Alabama's history. Until 2001, when a local man named Neil Williamson came forward and revealed that he was the Choco-Loco monster. Apparently, from the beginning, the monster was really just a 15-year-old kid wearing a bed sheet and holding a cow's skull over his head. The terrible creature was nothing more than a prank. 4 times in total, Neil dressed up in his monster outfit and then danced around on the side of the road so that passing drivers could get a glimpse of him. The only reason he stopped doing that is because the last driver that he scared actually got out of the car and started shooting at the monster. So that kind of ended the prank right then and there. Why Neil decided to reveal himself 30 years after the original incidents, I don't know, but either way, this is one cryptid that actually seems to have a definite resolution.
West Virginia, the fading dog, the West Virginia White Walker, the man in the bear, and the hidden devil of Crack Whip Furnace.
Okay, so when I was making my first cryptid video, I really wanted to make sure that every state had a cryptid that was funny or interesting or ridiculous in some kind of way, right? Like I wanted to find the best obscure cryptid that I could for each state. But the point of this project is actually kind of the exact opposite of that. Like the end goal here is to eventually document every single cryptid that I can find, no matter how short or vague or bland the story is. And so, with that in mind, check this out. Way back in 1894, the Journal of American Folklore published several personal experiences from persons living in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. So how about we go ahead and take a look at their stories. First up, one time a Mrs. S was going to visit her sister when a small white dog trotted alongside her on the road for a moment and then vanished into thin air. We're going to call that the fading dog. Next, a Mrs. H was riding down the road with her father when a tall white form rose out of the ground right next to their horse. The horse didn't seem to be afraid of the figure, and Mrs. H's father apparently didn't even notice it because he was very deaf. And so Mrs. H just watched as the phantom walked alongside the horse and then disappeared once the travelers reached a running stream. I think we're going to call that one the West Virginia White Walker. Next up, while walking home one night, Mr. B encountered a black bear that screamed at him in a human's voice. We're going to name that one the Man in the Bear, which is distinct from the man-bear that we talked about earlier. And last but not least, near a place called Crack Whip Furnace, a Mr. C was riding down the road one dark autumnal evening when his horse was suddenly attacked by something invisible. The poor horse was whipping its head around and snorting and plunging and rearing in terror, but it couldn't escape the unseen blows raining down upon its head. Mr. C tried to utter a prayer for his horse, but strangely, he found himself unable to speak. He struggled and struggled, and he tried and tried to talk until finally the name of God just burst from his lips. And that seemed to give his horse enough energy to escape the invisible demon. The horse sprang forward and ran down into a brook where seemingly the monster could not follow, although it stood on the shore and shrieked at horse and rider. We're going to call that one the hidden devil of Crack Whip Furnace. God!
California, the Hurleton croco-flier.
In June of 1882, A newspaper in Pennsylvania received a letter from two woodsmen living in California. The woodsmen said that they had been working in a forest near Hurleton, California one day when all of a sudden a massive creature flew above their heads. The monster was an 18-foot-long crocodile with 12 feet and 3 pairs of wings. One of the men raised up a shotgun and blasted at the beast, but the bullet just seemed to ricochet right off its skin, rattling as though striking against a thin piece of sheet iron. With a cry similar to that of a bear and calf combined, the monster flew off and disappeared, never to be mentioned ever again, as far as I can tell. I think I'm gonna hop onto like a free sound website and find the cry of a bear and calf and combine them so you can hear what the Hurleton croco-flier might sound like. Here we go.
Alabama, the wandering man of Tallahatchie Creek.
Some of the people up around Tallahatchie Creek say they've heard about the lantern that moves along the creek ever since they can remember. We're back in Alabama for an old Southern legend. According to tradition, a farmer used to live near Tallahatchie Creek in eastern Alabama along with his wife and kids. His wife, though, was a restless woman who couldn't stand country life. So one day, she took the children and ran off with a traveling sewing machine salesman. The farmer, of course, was crushed. He turned to drink, and he neglected his farm, and eventually the man grew so delirious from grief that he left his cabin behind and started wandering the countryside with a lantern, somehow convinced that his wife and children were lost in the woods of the Deep South. For months, the man desperately searched for his family, stumbling through the fields and trees until his beard grew long and his clothes turned to rags. Of course, the wandering man became a hot topic of conversation among the residents of the area. The isolated, lonely farmers of the Alabama countryside began to worry about the bobbing lantern they'd see crossing their fields late at night. Rumor and panic took hold. Doors and windows were barred late at night, and before long, the wanderer was accused of killing and eating livestock. And that was too much for the locals. A posse of men got together with guns and torches and set out into the woods. They searched long and hard through the cold forest before finally stumbling upon the wandering man asleep under an oak tree. The legends and whispers of the man's evil disposition flared up amongst the posse, and they pounced upon the wanderer. And right there, along the shores of the Tallahatchie, they killed him and decapitated the body. As the posse threw the man's head into the waters of the creek, a feeling of realization set in. Shamefully, the group returned to their homes, leaving behind on the shores of the creek a headless body and a still burning lantern. And to this day, in the depths of the darkest nights, if you peer into the waters of the Tallahatchie, then you just might see a lantern twinkling back at you, a bobbing light wandering up and down the banks of the creek. Most people, upon seeing something like that, would just turn tail and run, but the more courageous amongst us may see something else. If you have the spirit and the heart to stand fast and watch that lantern shine through the night, then you just might see a ghostly hand materialize around the lantern's handle. Then an arm, a shoulder, a chest, and a body. The ghost of the wanderer, headless and lonely, searching desperately, no longer for his family, but instead for his noggin. I just hope that one day he finds it.
Maine, the Dingball.
All right, I want to start this one off by showing you a photo of a logging camp in northern Maine from the early 1900s. You wouldn't know it from this picture, but those men are actually under constant threat from a horrible creature known as the Dingball. According to old lumberman legend, the Dingball is a panther with a heavy ball made of solid bone affixed to the end of its tail. Using its natural weapon, the Dingball cracks the skulls of its victims and then devours their bodies. And if that's not enough, the creature also has a sweet woman's voice that it uses to lure its victims into the woods. So if you're ever chopping wood up in northern Maine and you hear a woman calling out to you from the gloom of the forest, then stay put, because no record exists of anyone ever surviving a blow from a Dingball. Once it's got you, it's got you.
North Dakota, the Banshee of the Badlands.
Way back in October of 1888, the Butte Daily Miner reported that a horrible banshee had been terrorizing cattlemen in the Dakota Badlands. At the time, Dakota had not yet been split into the states of North and South Dakota, so I'm not actually 100% sure which of the two the banshee was haunting, but for reasons we'll see later, I'm pretty sure it's North Dakota. Anyway though, according to the paper, for about a year, pioneers and cowboys crossing through the Dakota Territory had been telling tales of a ghostly apparition that made its home near a rock formation called the Watchdog of the Badlands, because it heavily resembled a sitting dog. Recently, a real tough cowboy named John Watson had decided to go out and investigate the stories, and the following is his account. After setting out into the Badlands, Watson and his party reached the Watchdog at about midnight, and pretty much immediately the banshee made itself known. As the party walked towards the rock formation, a bright flash lit up the night and stopped the men dead in their tracks. A hush fell over the group. They gazed into each other's eyes with wonder and whispered amongst themselves and slowly worked up the courage to continue on towards the Watchdog. They walked for another 10 yards when whoosh, another flash, this time much more brilliant than the last. The men froze again and watched with terror as a hazy, shadowy, indescribable gloom began to settle in, and a figure robed in white appeared above them on a nearby butte. The great, rugged cowboys were terrified. They huddled together and clasped hands and trembled as the white phantom descended down the hill with its arms outstretched as if pleading for help. As the figure approached, one of the men found his voice and said, "Hello, who are you and what do you want?" And the phantom responded by shrieking into the faces of the horrified men. As the scream echoed through the Badlands, the banshee disappeared and reappeared back at the top of the butte. And the men took that as their cue to get the heck out of there. They stumbled away with trembling forms and stammered whispers. The Banshee, though, wasn't quite done with them yet. For over a mile, it followed the men back to the road, always hovering just a few feet away, as if escorting the party away from its home. Once the men made it back to civilization, Watson declared that he would not go back to that spot for all the cattle in Dakota. Nobody knows exactly who or what the Banshee really was, but many surmised her to be the spirit of a woman who was murdered and buried alone in the Badlands. And real quick, before we move on, the reason that I landed on North Dakota as the home of the Banshee is because I found this picture of Watchdog Butte in the Montana State Library archives, and also this picture that shows an even closer look at the rock formation. Both of these photos are from 1881, and both were apparently taken in North Dakota. So for now at least, I'm going to assume that this is the watchdog of the Badlands that was mentioned in the newspaper article, and I'm gonna go ahead and place this cryptids pin in North Dakota.
Massachusetts, the Truro Wild Man.
All right, how about we go out on a fun one? Back in May of 1879, the town of Truro, Massachusetts was buzzing with talk of a wild man that had recently appeared in town. For several days in a row, the town's school children had reported seeing a strange figure near an empty house on the edge of town. According to the children, a wild man or monster had been lurking around the home and sometimes even climbing in and out of the windows. What's really bizarre, though, is that the man was described as jacketless, vestless, and nearly or quite shirtless, whatever that means. Like, I guess maybe he had his shirt almost completely off, but maybe one arm was still in the sleeve or something like that. Or maybe, like, you know, when you're taking your shirt off over your head, sometimes you leave it around your neck like a scarf. Maybe he had it like that. Either way, though, after a few days of scaring the local children, the wild man was eventually revealed to be a Portuguese man who wanted to buy the house. So the reason that he was climbing through the window, I guess, was that so he could go inside and get a good look at the home. And why he needed to do that, well, jacketless, vestless, and nearly shirtless is anyone's guess. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. I got so many more of these, you really wouldn't believe it.